Tonight, Batman the Dark Knight has Batman making way more jokes than I'm comfortable with, that number being 0. Teen Titans has Tim Drake moving all of his female friends out onto a yacht, because of, the implication. And 3 major characters die this week. Only one of them has been majorly foreshadowed. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 78 of the Not So New 52. I am your host, and did you know that this episode officially marks 1.5 years of this show, of this thing? I know that on episode 75 I made a whole big shebang of like, oh wow, 75 episodes, but this is technically exactly 1.5 years after I started, episode 0. I don't know what 1.5 years would be on the anniversary gift chart. I know 1 year is paper, so I guess 1.5 would just be like really good paper. So like cardstock or stationery. So I expect to get some cardstock or stationery in the mail at some point soon. P.O. Box not listed anywhere. Anyway, I want to fill this air with something to talk about, but in all honesty, there's really not that much to talk about this week. Pretty straightforward week overall. Didn't bother to look into anything else going on in DC Comics, but Flashpoint movie, that's going to be a thing. So I assume that means that James Gunn's entire multiverse he's setting up afterwards is going to be the New 52, because that's what happens after Flashpoint. I expect nothing less now. Anyway, let's talk about comics. Comics coming out this week, we have 12 of them. So decently light week, including the number 17 issues of Batman the Dark Knight, Red Lanterns, Aquaman, The Flash, The Fury of Firestorm, The Savage Hawkman, All-Star Western, Teen Titans, iVampire, and Justice League Dark. Additionally, we have the number 8 issue of Batman Incorporated and the number 5 issue of Talon. Out of that, there's only like one event comic, which is Red Lanterns, finally tuning into Wrath of the First Lantern, but yeah, very quiet week, not a lot to talk about, so cue the music and comics. Batman Incorporated number 8, written by Grant Morrison, art by Chris Burnham and Jason Masters. So, nothing of consequence happens in this issue. Last week we left off with Batman being trapped in a safe underwater and Robin, Damian leaving the Batcave to go help him. And we see that he got into like a robot Iron Man suit and he's flying in towards central Gotham. He looks down and he sees Jim Gordon and Nightwing fighting off a whole bunch of kids who were brainwashed by Leviathan. And he immediately comes in, lays down some smoke, choking gas, and all the kids are basically knocked out, and Nightwing's like, okay, I have a good idea where he's headed to. I'm going to lead the police to handle this. So he follows Damian as Damian makes his way to Wayne Tower. We see that Batman is still submerged in the safe in the pool, and Talia is just taunting him, being like, oh, tick-tock, running out of time. Batman coughs up a lockpick, which manages to get him out of his restraints, but he's still, trapped in a safe. So then we cut to Red Robin, who just walks in the front door of Wayne Tower, and he's like, hey, is everything cool in here? And the people inside are like, yeah, what's with the costume? And he's like, oh, I'm with Batman Incorporated. We just, I just thought there was something dangerous about this place. And that young girl from last issue, her name is Ellie. I can't remember if that was established, but she's looking on because she hid earlier on. And one of the guys is about to attack Red Robin, and oh no, sorry, her name's not Ellie. No, she is Ellie. So I guess Ellie was the person behind it. I don't know. I'm confused. Anyway, she tells Red Robin to look out as one of the guys goes to attack him. They dodge some blows, and Red Robin starts taking out some guys, but then backup arrives from the balcony. Red Robin takes down a plane accidentally, and he loses his grip, but not before taking out a whole bunch of the guys on the balcony. And so he's about to be shot at again. But then Damian comes busting in his Iron Man suit, along with a bunch of kids who come in after him to attack. Damian's getting the crap beat out of him, but because he's in his suit, it doesn't care. And then he electrifies everybody and says, yeah, water plus electricity plus idiots equals... And then all of a sudden, more people show up to shoot. Nightwing comes in, tackles Damian out of the way. They have a little heart-to-heart, saying like, hey, we were Batman and Robin once in our pre-New 52 series. We were pretty good, and you were my favorite partner. And Nightwing's like, yeah, we were awesome. All right, let's go kick some ass. So they jump from behind their cover, throw down some smoke bombs, and start beating the crap out of everybody. And they specifically show that Ellie is now hiding underneath a tank that's in the main room for some reason. So out of the elevator comes Heretic, and he's holding the world bomb trigger, which I think was the thing that was set up last issue. Damian and Nightwing pop out of the smoke. They punch Heretic in the face. It does nothing. And so Heretic picks up Nightwing and just throws him across the room and starts getting into a fight with Damian. And Damian's like, hey, take me to my mom. I know that I'm the one she wants. And Heretic's like, no, we're going to fight. We're going to fight, and you're finally going to know me, your twin, my equal. And so he pulls out a sword, and Damian gets a spear, and they just start fighting each other in a pretty brutal fight, all things considered. Ellie picks up the world bomb trigger in the meantime. So once Damian gets knocked out for a little bit, Heretic goes over and says, like, you're going to give me that. And Damian pulls out a crossbow and says, I promised I was never going to kill again. And he shoots Heretic through supposedly the heart, but again, it does nothing. And then they just continue to fight for a little while. And Heretic, nothing is able to take him down. Robin keeps on getting beat up, bloodied. He is not doing well until finally he is cornered against a wall. And he's just under his breath pleading for his mom to call off this monster. Meanwhile, we see Batman has managed to make it out of the safe. He is jumping off the roof and tackling one of the Man-Bats to get down to the lower floor. But then we get a full-page spread of Damian being impaled by his sword. And the final page is Talia just crying a silent tear as Bruce, as Batman, comes in and cradles Damian's dead body. And that's it. That is the death of Damian Wayne. I knew it was coming. With a cover like this issue has, it's coming. But it's still crazy to me, looking back on it 10 years later, that they actually did this, because it wasn't that long ago that Damian was actually introduced in terms of before this issue. It was only maybe like 5 years or so, and they had the cojones to just say, no, he's dead, and left him dead for a decent amount of time at that. So all in all, I think this issue it's a good send-off to Damian. Not only does it have that minute with Nightwing of saying, hey, we were Batman and Robin, we were pretty good, gave the emotional beat, but it also was just solely focused on, no, he's good. He didn't die because he was just an inept character. He died because he was put up against something he could never possibly handle. And I appreciate that it's not a cheap death, As for art, Chris Burnham's been doing the art on the whole thing. I will say that Jason Masters, his fill-in pages are really obvious as to where it is him, but it's not bad. It's just obvious. It doesn't quite flow, but I don't think anything can really match Chris Burnham's art, so there's that. Overall, I'd give this one... I don't know. It feels like because it's the death of a character, it should rate higher just because it's an important moment, but being an important moment doesn't just get away with, it doesn't automatically give it a 10. So I'm going to give this one, I'm going to give it an 8 flat. I'm just giving it 8. I think that the biggest thing this issue is lacking is there isn't a moment between Bruce and Damian. I think that's the moment I would have said, if they had nailed it just a little bit more, I would have been all in. Mind you, they have been doing that over in Batman and Robin, but I just wanted it here as well, you know? Just that little extra thing of right before he dies, just having even a flashback would have sold it, but it was missing that. So I'm just going to half a point off for that. But otherwise, great issue. Definitely sells the punch of Damian is dead. And yeah, we'll see how Batman Incorporated manages to wrap up from there. Red Lanterns number 17, written by Peter Milligan, art by Miguel Sepulveda. This is technically a part of Wrath of the First Lantern, but it's really just kind of a, hey, we didn't really get to finish up our story from Rise of the Third Army. Can we go back and do that real quick? So, last issue we had Atrocitus sicking his Manhunters onto Oa against the Guardians, while he took some of them and went to Malthus in order to find a special something, and he came across the Ghost of Krona. So this issue picks up basically showing how the Manhunters on Oa were doing, showing that the Third Army was just kind of still around at this point, like it had yet to do the thing at the end of the event. So they're launching their assault on the planet. Some Green Lanterns are fighting back against them, but overall the battle's just continuing. Meanwhile on Malthus, Krona, the Ghost of Krona, at least, is talking to Atrocitus, and he's like, hey, go easy on me, man. I know I'm your mortal enemy and all, but I'm kind of dead. And Atrocitus is like, no, you suck. You're literally the worst. And he's like, okay, but me and you are not so different. And then he proceeds to describe that he lost people too. Apparently, he was young. He had a family of three, two wives and a kid. And then they all died, which apparently it was just your average everyday house fire. And he tells Atrocitus, he's like, see, I lost people too. And Atrocitus is like, okay, but like you're the one who killed my people. And he's like, I have details. So at that point, he's like, no, there's no excuse. You suck. I'm not going to pity, like, I'm not going to give you any pity or anything like that. But then he's like, wait, you do have a harsh upbringing. Maybe I could explain it. Could I even excuse your behavior? And the Manhunters are like, boss, why are you getting all weird? And he's like, oh, geez. Okay, the thing we're looking for must be nearby. It's called the Great Heart. It's that thing that the Guardians put all of their emotions into, and it makes me more emotional being around it. So let's go find that. It must be like right beneath us. And the Manhunters are like, oh, okay, we'll go find a route to get down to it. And he's like, don't worry about it. And Atrocitus punches the ground, and just underneath is a giant cavern that hosts the Great Heart. And we see Krona's like, I'm sorry, Atrocitus, if only you could understand. And then someone else comes in, and he's like, oh, I am the Ghost of Krona. Let me tell you about my two wives and my kid. But then he looks and he's like, wait a minute, it's you. You're the First Lantern. He doesn't say it, but we all know it. And he's like, you're the First Lantern. How did you? And then First Lantern, like, sticks his hand into the Ghost of Krona and seemingly destroys him. So then we cut down to Earth, specifically London, where a woman is being harassed by some guy from a bar, and she's basically trying to outrun him. And we see Rancor looking on, and he's like, you know, I could probably help her, but she just run away because I look so scary. But what if I could make a construct that didn't make me look so scary? And then he gets this crazy ass like web of blood all over him, and he's like, yes, I will make myself look human and I can live a normal life. So then we go back to Malthus, and as Atrocitus lands, a bunch of robots come up, and they're like, hi, we're the Guardians of the Great Heart. Do you know what the Great Heart is? And Atrocitus is like, yes, it's filled with the Guardians' emotions. And it's like, yep, that's right. Also, we only let people pass if they are drained of emotion, and you feel a lot of emotions. And he's like, all I feel is rage. And it's like, okay, but yeah, rage is an emotion, guy. I don't know why you don't think that. But he says, like, no, you also feel other things deep in your heart. You have a sadness. You have all these different things going on. But here's the thing. Us robots, we are technically able to drain you of that emotion. Isn't that something you want? To never feel this hurt again? To be able to live without it? And as they're taunting him with this, the Manhunters go up to one of the robots guarding the Great Heart, and they're like, hey, let us by. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't let anybody by who has emotions. He's like, oh, wait, you're robots. Go on in. It's going to take all the time you need. So Atrocitus is kind of just losing his mind at this point because he's like, I could do it. I could lose all of my emotions. I could never feel this way again. That sounds pretty good. So meanwhile, back in London, the woman got cornered by the guy from the bar, and Rancor, in his disguise, shows up, and he's like, oh, leave her alone. And he's like, oh, well, you're her knight in shining armor. And he's like, don't make me angry. You won't like me when I'm angry. And then we cut to his arm being broken in like 4 places. And the woman's like, wow, okay, I think you broke his arm. And Rancor's like, oh, I'm sorry. Does that horrify you? Am I a freak to you? And she's like, no, let me buy you a drink. So he's able to live his normal life, and he's like, maybe, just maybe, I can make this work. And we see Bleez just watching on from a distance, like, oh god, that guy's an idiot. So then we go back to the Manhunters, who are doing something to basically pack up the Great Heart and take it with them, and so they start shielding it. And as they shield it, Atrocitus starts getting back his stuff, and he's like, wait a minute, hold on, I'm feeling less crazy and more rage. And so he spits out his napalm blood at the robots and starts tearing them apart. And he's like, oh, what is pity compared to rage? So Manhunters pack up the Great Heart, and they're like, cool, here's the plan. We're going to take the Great Heart, give the emotions back to the Guardians, and that way they won't be immune to the Third Army anymore, and they'll have to shut them down. Because nobody told him that the Third Army is no longer an issue. And so a bright light shows up behind him, and he's like, oh, who's this? Another guy got to beat up. And in pops the First Lantern, who says, hi, I'm the First Lantern. I'm going to do some stuff with your mind and your past. Here we go. And that's the issue. So yeah, it's mostly just Third Army stuff. I think they thought they had another issue when they were plotting this out. I think they thought like maybe they could get the Red Lanterns one to come out before or in the same week as the actual wrap up, because yeah, this isn't a First Lantern. I mean, he shows up at the end, but like this isn't a part of that event really. This is just Third Army. So in terms of that, I mean, I actually kind of love the idea that because he's not part of the Green Lantern Corps, and because he had his plans that were just completely separate to anything going on in the Green Lantern books, that nobody told him that it was done. That he's just stuck in an event that was already finished. I kind of love that idea. Overall, though, art-wise, writing-wise, it's all good. It's all fine. I don't really have an issue with any of it. I think the biggest thing I have a problem with is that Atrocity. I mean, I know it's because he was so close to the Great Heart, but it's so weird to see him be like, no, all I need is rage, but maybe I can love, but rage, but love. It was just a bit off-key for me. So overall, 7.5. It's a good issue. It's a fine issue. I'm at least interested in how the First Lantern's going to interact with him, but we'll see how that turns out, I guess. Batman The Dark Knight number 17, written by Gregg Hurwitz, art by Ethan Van Sciver. Last issue, we just had a whole thing of Mad Hatter kidnapping people and Batman trying to figure out where is he and what's he doing. So this issue picks up with Mad Hatter at a baseball game, and he's selling a hat to this kid who's just like being a total dick. He's just like, you have funny teeth and you're really short. And Mom's like, I'm sorry, he's an ass. Can we get him a hat? And he sells him a hat, and we see that inside is a mind control chip. And as soon as he gives him the hat and the kid puts it on, the mom's back is turned, and he just like forces the kid to punch himself in the face a few times. And he's just like, it's whatever. So then we cut to Batman with like a whole circular screen set up around him, and he's trying to sort down where Mad Hatter could be. And they do 2 jokes in a row here of bata mining with a B. And Batman says, oh, he's disappeared and let us, and Alfred chimes in with down the rabbit hole, to which Batman chastises him for making the joke, and Alfred goes, was it really any worse than batamining? I'll get to that at the end. So anyway, he's just like, yeah, okay. He made a bunch of donations to a bunch of places. And mind you, as he's explaining this, it intercuts with him explaining it to Jim Gordon as well. So he made donations to a bunch of places that allow him to set up shop in certain places. And he's doing this through shell companies. And then at all of the places where he's donated money to set up shop, someone gets kidnapped. So that's how they're trying to trace him down. And Jim is basically like, okay. One more joke I need to see here. He says, how many corporations does Mad Hatter have? And Batman says, I stopped counting after 10. What's wrong? Ran out of fingers? And the boots are laced tight, says Batman. So at that point, he's just like, all right, look, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to go after him. We're just going to wait until one of his goons show up, and then we're going to follow the goons. Because everyone involved with him is just being mind controlled, and they could easily just, they're not involved. They're innocent people. So at that point, Gordon faces out the window and says, oh, we'll put unmarked activity and blah, blah, blah. And then he says, this is the part where I turn around and you're gone, right? And Batman says, nope, I'm still here. And there's 2 beat panels of them just looking at each other. And then Jim's just like, okay then. And Batman leaves. I don't understand why this book has comedy, but I'll get to it at the end. So we have another audition where Mad Hatter shoots a man and then brings in a woman and says the line, say the line, there you are, sir, can I get you anything else? And she just screams for help, like bloody murder. And at that point, Mad Hatter's like, wait a minute, hold on, say that again, just like that. And she screams again, and he's like, perfect, you're perfect for a role I've got in mind. So then we get a flashback to Mad Hatter's past. And as far as I know, this is real. So there was a beautiful girl named Alice D, I believe. And she was super cute or whatever in high school. And then this bully comes up to Jervis and spits on him and just starts prodding him to do something. Just wants to get a rise out of him. But then another guy shows up and pulls out a wiffle ball bat and hits the bully in the back of the head and says hey, you leave our friend alone. Jervis is our personal buddy. And it turns out he was actually decently popular despite being very much nerdy. And we see his father owned a hat making store, and he goes through the whole thing of oh, we used to have mercury and that made hatters go crazy, and that's what Mad as a Hatter comes from. Anyway, if you like this girl, we can go to that new park that's opening up. Why don't you invite her? So he invites Alice to the park, and she enthusiastically says yes. She very much wants to go with Jervis. So then cut back to modern day. We see Jervis calling out on a megaphone all these things that need to be perfect. He's trying to replicate something, and he's like, oh, that needs to be slanted less. It's at a 45-degree angle. I need it at 30 degrees. And the guy's like, I don't see the difference. And Jervis is like, oh, you don't know the difference between those angles? And he just snaps the guy's neck and tilts it 90 degrees. He's like, do you see it now? So Batman's like, okay, I have a lead on what I think could be Jervis's next place that he's going to steal from someone. It's a hospital charity picnic that had any donation from one of these shell companies. So I'm going to go do that. And Alfred's like, hey, weren't you dating a girl last issue? And he's like, yep, she's gone now, though. Completely forget about her. And Alfred's like, but she was different. And that's that. So at this point, the picnic begins. We see Tweedledee and Tweedledum go out and grab a kid and say, hey kid, do you like haunted houses? We got one up on the hill. Why don't you come check it out? And the kid's like, okay, sounds fun. So as they make their way into the house, they shove the kid in and turn around. And then Batman just comes down, grabs the kid, and pulls him back out again. And Dee and Dum are like, oh my God, was that aliens? Did he just get abducted by aliens? My cousin's dad might have gotten abducted once. And at that point, Batman comes in, starts attacking them, but he purposely lets them get away. And the kid's like, oh, this is the best ride ever. Thanks, Batman. So he let them get away because he put a tracker on them, and he's following their van to see where it goes. So then we cut to more flashbacks of Jervis's past, where they arrive at this new park. It's an Alice in Wonderland themed park, and he makes his way through, and we see all the different Alice in Wonderland scenes with him and Alice having fun. And we do specifically see them go to a funnel cake location where the funnel cake guy says, "There you are, sir. Can I get you anything else?" Hint, hint for what's going on. And as they approach the end of the day, he's like, "Oh, you know, Jervis, I wasn't sure if I'd like today, but I'm really glad I said yes." And all the narration is basically Jervis saying, you ever have a memory that, like, you just want to revisit over and over again and have everything be as it was in that moment because it's just so perfect? Yeah, I have one of those memories. So at that point, Dee and Dum get Mad Hatter and just like, we got a problem. Batman's here. And we see Batman is up above and he's like, okay, I followed them here, but there is nothing. There is literally nothing here. So I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm going to keep an eye out. And it turns out all of this is taking place inside a abandoned missile silo, which is reinforced concrete that all of Batman's sensors can't penetrate. So at that point, Mad Hatter's like, okay, well, Batman, he's gone. He'll keep an eye around this area, but we're staying under the radar. I'm going to be busy. Nobody disturb me, or else I'll skin you. And he goes up to the hatch outside the silo. He takes some hallucinogenic tea, and he sees these memories of Alice in his head, and then these horrifying nightmares that they transform into. And that's the issue. Okay, so this book has been, since its inception, a very dark book, a very grim, a very foreboding experience, I guess. Why do we have so much humor in this? Like, I was caught off guard by like 4 pages, one after another, all of them having jokes. Bata mining, down the rabbit hole, my boots are laced tight, and then Batman just not Batmaning out of a scene. It felt strange in a book that had such grim moments, even just last issue of Jervis Tetch just strangling a man, and it looked horrifying. We got this weird humor beat going on in this one. I don't know, it's a little bit of dissonance. I don't know if it's on purpose or what it is, but it didn't feel right. I had no idea what to expect turning the page. Whether I was going to be horrified or, I wouldn't say amused by the jokes, just more horrified that they're in this book. Anyway, overall, art is fine. Story, I'm intrigued by the Mad Hatter's backstory. I want to see, because obviously everything that happened turned out really well. I want to see what managed to flip him into becoming this, you know? I want to see, we set up the rise, I want to see the fall. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'm giving it a 7. I want it to be known I would have given it a 7.5 if not for those weird jokes that are thrown in, because it just doesn't feel, it's all, you know what it is? It's all on Batman's side. The fact that Mad Hatter isn't doing any of it, it's all Batman making jokes, and that's weird to me. So yeah, 7. Talon number 5, written by James Tynion IV and Scott Snyder, art by Guillem March. So last issue is a whole big fight thing, but Casey, Calvin, and Sarah took out the Gotham Butcher, Talon, and they'll never see him again. This issue picks up in the Batcave, where Batman is basically just recapping the last 4 issues, and it's just like, okay, we got some sightings of him at a hotel, and then there was a kerfuffle on the street, and we got an image of him. And I'm telling all of this to you, Nightwing, because you just happen to be here. And Nightwing's like, I literally am just here to, like, fix some stuff that's around. Like, I don't know why you're telling me this. But regardless, Batman's like, hey, remember how we just got done with Death of the Family? And Dick's like, yeah, that's why things are a bit strained between us right now. Well, apparently none of that matters. So Batman basically is saying, I've been trying to pull out the Court of Owls bit by bit so as to, suss out where they are and take them down stealthily. This guy is just wanting to start a war, and that's going to kill a lot of people. So we have to find him and stop him, whoever he may be. And then we cut to Calvin, Sarah, and I just remembered her name at the beginning. Oh, that's going to bug me. Anyway, we see all of them just relaxing and chilling and just enjoying some relaxation time in Sebastian Clark's underground bunker. And as it turns out, it's been 2 weeks that they've just been chilling here. And Sebastian comes in and he's like, hey, wanted to check on how you're recovering from your fight and maybe see if you wanted to train or something like that, because we do eventually have to get back out there. And I still can't remember her name. God, that's gonna bug me. Casey. Got it. Anyway, Casey's like, hey, whatever you're doing next, count me in. I want to help. I want to be on the front lines for this. And Calvin keeps on giving her like, oh no, we'll get to that. You don't got to worry about that right now. But when Sebastian comes in, he's like, oh hey, you want to do some training? Super cool. Let's go. We don't have to talk about any future missions at all right here, right now. And Casey is obviously pissed about that. So we see a thing where he's doing the whole Houdini's in a straitjacket, and he's given a timer of a few seconds before he's sliced up by swords and falls onto a bed of nails. He gets out of it perfectly fine. And Sebastian's like, why are you still wearing the bandages? Because you are clearly, like, totally healed. You have no problems at all. And Calvin's like, I just want to live in this little fantasy life we've got going on. Can't I just pretend that the Court of Owls aren't out there for a while? And Sebastian's like, I get it. Totally do. But they are. And the sooner we take them out, the sooner you can just live this life instead of it being a fantasy. And Calvin's like, that's not the only thing. The other thing is that obviously our next big hit needs to be Securitas, which is the company that Casey's dad made and left to her, despite the fact that she had to give it up when she went on the run. It now belongs to the Court of Owls, but like, how is Casey going to feel about dismantling this thing her father made? And Casey is listening from outside the room, and she's like, screw that place. My dad went crazy because of it, because of the Court of Owls, like, forcing him to hand it over. Screw it. Let's burn it to the ground. Don't you ever worry about my feelings like that. So at this point, we cut to high above Gotham City, where, wouldn't you know it, Gotham Butcher survived, and he's being chewed out by the Court of Owls. It's just like, hey, it's been 2 weeks, man. We thought you were the best. And he's like, well, I'm the best at tracking, and I would be tracking if Calvin were moving, but he's just staying in one place, which I've narrowed down to like a city block. And the Court of Owls is like, well, just know that we are not happy, and you better get to work, okay? And he pulls out the earpiece, crunches it in his fingers, saying, yes, masters. And then we cut to this weird little suburban family in the middle of Gotham, and there's a knock at the door. It's the butcher. He's like, hi, I'm sorry to intrude. Really, I am. But I just got some bad news, and I need to take it out on something. And he just cracks the guy's head in. So then we see Casey, Sebastian, and Calvin looking over a diagram of Securitas Island, which is apparently called the Fortress. And Sebastian's like, all right, I got some schematics. We can look over them and see like how we can get in. And Casey's like, don't bother. My dad gave away like a whole bunch of fake schematics and burned all the real ones. Nobody knows how this island works, save for the little bit I could pick up. And here's the deal. It is completely internalized. There are no outside telephone lines or internet or anything like that. Everything is in-house. If it detects any sort of explosion or earthquake or anything like that from above, it will immediately wipe all the data on all the computers. And there is like literally no way to communicate with people inside from the outside. And everyone's like, well, what do you have in mind then? Because it sounds impenetrable. And Casey relates that her father only told her one thing about the inner workings of the island, and it was on her 7th birthday. And we see a young Casey marching in with an action figure, and her dad's like, Casey, I figured it out. I figured out how to stop them from attacking from the sea. And he's just clearly nuts, mind you. And he's like, I figured it out. Give me that action figure. And he's like, oh, but it's my birthday present from you, Daddy. And she's like, shut up. Give me it. And puts the action figure in a boat and sends the boat remote controlled towards the island. And he's like, watch this. There are turbines underneath the island. And if any boat gets too close, and then the boat with the action figure just gets drawn under the surface and completely chopped up. And he's like, see, that'll stop them from coming in from the ocean. And Calvin's like, that's deeply disturbing, and you might want to talk about that, but I don't really see how that helps us get in. And apparently the turbines are able to be turned off in the event of somebody like in the company coming up on a boat, but only if they're pre-expected. So it's like, all right, well, we'll just hop on one of those boats. It's like, nope, there's a whole DNA scanning thing. And it's like, okay. So they think about it for a few minutes, and it turns out that if they can go down while the turbines are off, Calvin can swim into the turbines and get into the runoff system behind it. And then once they're in there, they're going to set off a bomb, which will wipe all the computers. That's the plan. Then we cut back to the Gotham Butcher. He's just wiping up afterwards. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry for intruding on you all, but like, hoo-wee, did I need that. Anyway, I'm going to find Calvin Rose, and I'm probably going to do the same thing to him as we see this horrifying scene that he's left behind him. So they do the scene. He's strapped on underneath one of the legitimate boats, and as the turbines turn off, he swims in underneath them. Once he gets in, he places something which does allow them a little bit of radio contact, but they have to like keep on constantly refreshing it, so it goes out every few seconds. But it allows Casey to hack into their internal documents, and she's like, oh, hey, I just saw who the current CEO is of Securitas Island, and it's John Wycliffe, which Sebastian immediately is like, oh my god, bail on all of it. He's currently the head grandmaster of the Owls. If he's there, we are screwed. Get him out of there. So obviously they can't manage to get contact with him. Calvin accidentally sets off a trap, and some bars come down trapping him, and 3 Talons come out. And apparently one of them is a grandfather to the other two. So it's like, oh, Calvin Rose, you should have stayed in hiding. And the other two are like, yes, grandpapa. How funny. So that's the issue. I know I probably went too in detail with that, but they really go in detail in the book. So I just wanted to relate that. I like it. I think this book has been good from the beginning. I like how we're now going with this, still moving forward with the original plan of, taking out all of the Court of Owls assets and whatnot, but we're just slowly building the stakes over time. Now we're on this big island, which is by far their biggest asset, but of course the hardest to take down. It's an interesting formula, and we've managed to trim down the team as well. Based off last issue, it looks like they never had Casey get back in contact with her old military buddies. So, yeah, overall, I give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I can't tell you exactly why it deserves that, but it just feels right. So, yeah, 7.5. Aquaman number 17, written by Geoff Johns, art by Paul Pelletier. This is a epilogue to Throne of Atlantis, while also setting up the next arc. So we open up with a little narration saying, like, the Phoenicians called their like little local water system thing going on near their country the Seven Seas, and then it was adopted by later cultures until eventually it just kind of meant all of Earth's oceans. So keep that in your brain for a while. And then we see a bunch of dead whales, and as it turns out, there are some whaling ships who are killing these whales for profit. And then some speedboats come up and they're like, hey, stop killing those whales, Captain. We've only been here for 20 minutes. You've over-poached or whatever. And they're saying that they've alerted the authorities and they'll be on their way out shortly. And then all of a sudden the captain on this ship, Captain he has a name, Moeller, pulls out a huge Atlantean weapon and says, well, we're going to shoot them because the authorities aren't going to actually show up. So they start firing off their Atlantean weapon. But then all of a sudden, a trident comes out, jams it, and the gun backfires on the ship. And wouldn't you know it, it's Arthur, Aquaman, and a bunch of Atlanteans. And he's like, yep, I am now king of Atlantis, king of the seven seas. I am Aquaman. And so at that point, all of the crew ready up their weapons and whatnot, but then they see it's Aquaman and they're like, oh, wait, crap. I don't think this is really going to work out. So Aquaman steps up and he's like, all right, you're done hunting for good. And he's like, I have a license. And he's like, yeah, for a certain amount. You have gone over that quota. And by the way, these are my seas. I'm the one who determines the rules here. You're trespassing. And he picks the guy up. Meanwhile, we meet this new bodyguard who's about to kill one of the crewmates. And Aquaman steps in like, no. We let them live. And the guy's like, they would just as easily kill us. Why should we not do this? And he's like, I'm sorry, are you questioning the king? And he's just like, well, Orm always at least explained the stuff he did. I want to know why you're saying this. And Aquaman's like, okay, what's your name? Turns out this guy is Merc. He is the leader of the Men of War, the frontline army of Atlantis. And he goes through his whole thing of why he is so deserving of this role. And how he hates the land dwellers for what they do to the sea, and specifically they killed all these whales. If you let the humans live, they will always return to kill again. And Aquaman's like, okay, but like they're going to be arrested and they're going to be put on trial because the only things you know about humans are the people who do bad things. There are good people. For instance, these whale people who came up and tried to defend them, they're good people, see? But then they get up on board and just like, hey, yeah, Aquaman, thanks for the help and all, but we kind of also hate Atlantis because of all the stuff that happened in Throne of Atlantis. You drowned 3 cities. And he's like, I didn't do that. Atlantis did that. And it was their former king. It's a whole thing. Anyway, you know, technically you whale people are eco-terrorists. And it's like, well, technically Atlanteans are terrorists. It's like, fair point. Anyway, I gotta go. And then Merc all of a sudden jumps in the way of him and Aquaman and the terrorists. And Aquaman's like, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, he was going to attack you. I was simply defending him. He's like, don't defend me unless I ask you to. And he's like, well, I've defended King Orm, but yeah, no, sorry. I'll wait for your permission to defend you, my lord. Ugh. And so Aquaman's just like not loved by anybody on board. He jumps off. He sees one of the dying whales and he's like, all right, I'm sorry. I should have been here for this. And Cyborg calls up saying, hey, Amanda Waller has spoken to the president, needs to talk to you. And he's like, all right, I'll be there as soon as I can. So then we see deep on the seabed, there's some group in some crazy ass scuba gear, and they come across some Atlantean weapons down on the floor. And turns out that's what Waller wanted to talk about. And she's talking to Aquaman and saying, hey, there were some Atlantean weapons that were lost. They're being sold on the black market right now. I'm not sure what's going on with it. We need your help on this. And Aquaman's like, don't worry. I'll find it and I'll take care of it. They are the weapons of my people. I will get them out of the hands of Earth people. And Waller's like, all right, fair enough. By the way, King Orm is probably going to be given the death penalty. And Aquaman's like, I'm sorry. I thought that was off the table. He's like, yeah, if he pled guilty, which he hasn't. So he's probably going to get the death penalty. And Waller basically says, like, hey, you aren't exactly loved by the people of Atlantis, and you definitely aren't loved, or Atlantis as a whole is not very well liked by the surface world. So who are you doing this for? Like, what is this all for in the end? And Aquaman just can't give an answer, so he jumps off into the water and goes to take care of his work. Meanwhile, Amanda calls in saying that, hey, this is Waller. If they want to make a move on Mara, they better do so now. So then we cut to Amnesty Bay where Mara is shopping. And the one woman is asking her, like, hey, why didn't you go to Atlantis with your husband? He's like, it's complicated, but I really don't belong in Atlantis. And then all of a sudden she is stopped by the police saying, like, hey, we have some unfinished business. Like when you attacked the town, you need to come with us. So at this point, we see Aquaman guiding a whale down to the bottom of an ocean where they will, feed the ecosystem and whatnot. And Aquaman sends out one of his psychic waves to all the fish in the sea. And I mean like the whole Earth's oceans. And he's like, I am here now. I will not fail you again. And we see the psychic wave make its way all the way to Antarctica, where some being comes out of a cave saying, oh, King of the Seven Seas, huh? How wrong you are. And I'm guessing that's going to be the big villain of the next arc. So, as a epilogue to Throne of Atlantis, I think it's good. It shows that Aquaman is not quite welcomed into Atlantis open arms. Like, they are very begrudgingly taking him, especially with the entire war from the surface still lingering over Atlantis' heads. Like, they wanted to do that. That was a thing they wanted to do, and they are now told, nope, and you're never going to do it again. So I just like that interplay. Overall, it's a fine issue. Art's great. I think we're setting up a few things in terms of Mara, what she's going to be doing, how the surface world is going to react to Atlantis and whatnot. There's a whole bunch going on. I'm interested to see how it plays off, and Aquaman so far hasn't really disappointed. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it an 8. It's a low 8. It doesn't do anything incredible. It's just kind of wrapping up a few loose threads and then setting up the next one. But I really do like the characterization of Aquaman here of he's doing this because he feels he has to. He's doing it out of a sense of responsibility, not because he feels adored or that he is well liked by the people involved. And I think that says more to the character than any other media really has. The Fury of Firestorm number 17, written and art by Dan Jurgens. Last issue, Firestorm wrapped up a whole bunch of plot lines and then Teen Titans took notice of them. This issue picks up basically undoing all of those last plot lines because Dr. Miguel took over Firestorm's body and broke a lot of stuff. And so he's using his transmutation powers to go fix it. So we open in South Dakota where Ronnie and Jason are like, okay, easy enough, we studied some pictures. We're just going to put Mount Rushmore back to the way it was because now it has the faces of a bunch of famous inventors and science people and Dr. Miguel. So we've studied the pictures. It's just changing rock shape. We can easily do it. And they focus and Ronnie makes some jokes about oh yeah, I'm going to make it the Simpsons instead. And it's just no, don't do that, Ronnie. It's I'm just kidding. I'm going to change it to U2. I think Bono would look really good up front. Which I can't imagine a teenager making a U2 joke like that. But regardless, we then see that, oh, they did it. It's all put back to normal. And then he's immediately attacked by a military helicopter. And Jason's in his head telling him, look, we just got to get away. We can outrun them easily. And Ronnie's no, I didn't do anything, okay? This was all someone else in our body. Let's just go in there and tell them that. Jason's that's not a good idea. And Ronnie's oh, I was just going to do it. So he goes inside the helicopter, and it's just look, guys, there are multiple firestorms. There's a bunch of people who even look like me, but it's not me. I'm the only one left. I took care of all the other ones. You're not going to have to worry. Pass that to your higher-ups. I'm going to fix everything that was broken. Okay, cool, great. And so he leaves, and Jason's well, that was a very measured response of you, Ronnie. And he's yeah, I got it in me sometimes. And the military guys are I assume you heard all that, General Eiling? And Eiling's yeah, I still don't trust him. Follow him as best you can. So then we cut to the Teen Titans, who are apparently watching a news report of how Mount Rushmore got fixed. And they're basically saying hey, Red Robin, you're really focused on that Firestorm guy, but he just fixed Mount Rushmore. Is he really that bad? And she's I don't know what he is, but he's got incredible powers, and it could be possible that Nowhere is already after him. It'd be Nowhere? That organization from our book? Golly, I thought they only went after teenagers. Firestorm looks like an adult. And Red Robin's don't ask me how, but I know he isn't. Anyway, let's go find him. So, at that point, we see Ronnie and Jason arrive back at Ronnie's house. His mom is about to go out on a date with Jason's dad, and Jason's okay, that's not incredibly weird or anything like that. Have fun, Miss Raymond. So Tanya's inside the rec room waiting for them to get back. And turns out that that essay that Tanya did for Ronnie was so good that it got submitted for an award for a young scholars competition. And Ronnie's like, awesome. And he won. Like, he won the competition. And Ronnie's like, that's great. That's awesome. But Jason's like, dude, you didn't write it. That's Tanya. She should get the recognition for that. And Tanya's like, no. It's fine. I mean, I am kind of bummed, but I understand. You need to keep your academic integrity in check. And Jason's like, it ain't right, but all right, I guess if Tanya's okay with it. And Ronnie's like, don't worry, Tanya, I'll make it up to you, I promise. But first, they have to go fix Star Labs. So apparently the idea here is that they're going to go over all the rubble that made Star Labs is still there. They're just going to reconstitute it back into a highly technological and very complex laboratory that is totally no more difficult than Mount Rushmore. But before they can do anything, Kid Flash shows up, throws Firestorm into a nearby, like, bog, as best as I can describe it. And he's just like, hey, we're the Teen Titans, and we think you might be working for Nowhere. And Firestorm's like, why does everyone keep attacking me before just talking to me? For God's sakes, I'm sick of it. And he starts blasting at Solstice. And Kid Flash doesn't take that well, starts punching him down to the ground. Firestorm transmutes his shoes into giant, like, flippers, so he's unable to run. And Robin's like, you have the power of transmutation. I figured, but I also have this. And he just, like, throws a bomb at him. It doesn't do anything but explode, so I don't understand how that deals with the transmutation. But anyway, they keep blasting at Ronnie, and Ronnie's like, all right, Jason, what do you think? And Jason's like, I mean, I would say patience usually, but maybe right here's where we need to make a statement. So at that point, Firestorm just, like, Super Saiyan starts charging up, and he's got this huge energy field around him, and just be like, now I don't know what this Nowhere thing is, but I've never heard of it. And the Teen Titans all get blasted back, and they're like, geez, guy, chill. It's not like we did anything to you, despite the fact they all were attacking him. But regardless, he gets them all away from him enough that he then is able to turn back to Star Labs. And he's like, all right, look, I'm just going to fix this thing and bail because screw this. I don't want to be here. So he starts transmuting all the rocks in Star Labs, and he pictures, like, the blueprints in his head. And he's like, oh, it's working. I can do it. And the Teen Titans look on and they're like, oh my God, can he do it? It seems too complicated. It's too complex. There's no way. And then Red Robin's like, I figured he'd be coming here next. He's trying to fix all the things that he broke before. He might just be a Teen Titan after all. But wouldn't you know it, he failed. He couldn't do it. And Ronnie's like, geez, all right, I gotta bail on this. It's too much. And Teen Titans walk up and they're like, hey, we're not here to punch you anymore. We can tell you're one of the good guys and we trust you in that. Red Robin says that you're not from Nowhere, so you're not from Nowhere, and would you like to be a Teen Titan? And Firestorm's like, oh my God, no, thanks, but no, that is not for me, bye. And then he just leaves, and we see they split up, and Ronnie's like, hey, I gotta take care of something. And he goes and talks to his English teacher and just like, hey, or maybe it's history, I don't know, regardless, talks to his teacher, just like, hey, Tanya wrote that paper. It wasn't me. She was just doing me a favor. She's the one who deserves the recognition. And the teacher's like, okay, can you give me another paper by Monday night? And he's like, what, seriously? I'm not going to get, like, taken out for cheating? And she's like, I'm here to teach you. I'm not here to punish you. And it seems like you are genuinely upset about this. So yeah, just get me another paper by Monday and we'll consider it even. It's just like, oh, sweet. Yeah, cool. Awesome. So at that point, he runs home to tell his mom, and it's just like, Mom, you won't believe it. I'm not getting kicked off the football team. But as he comes into his house, everything is wrecked. There seems to be blood on the walls, and written in blood is, she's mine now, Firestorm. And Ronnie sheds a tiny little tear and says, Mom? So yeah. I mean, okay. By this point, I'm sure the cancellation would have already been announced. This is ending at issue 20. It seems like we're going into the final arc here. I'm interested to see what it would be. I do think this little Teen Titans distraction was, I don't want to say pointless, but it just felt without any teeth, It just felt like it was like, okay, maybe Firestorm would have been like more interested in joining, but clearly he wasn't going to actually join because that would have to be covered in the Teen Titans book. So it, with any sort of meta sense of going into it, that entire subplot just felt like stupid, especially even in the most literal sense, like, oh, he's fixed the Grand Canyon. Seems like he could be working for the bad guys. It's like, yeah, really, Red Robin? Thanks for that. So, did I say Grand Canyon? I meant Mount Rushmore. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and say this one is a... It's like a 6, but it's like a high 6. Not quite 6.5, but it's got issues. It's not quite doing anything at the moment, but it is at least setting up a future plot. It gave a little bit of character development, but it's just kind of average overall. You know, it's like what I expect from this book. So, yeah, 6. The Flash, number 17, written by Francis Manapul and Brian Buccellato, art by Francis Manapul. So, last issue, Barry and Grodd went into the Speed Force to fight, and then Iris showed up. And then this issue opens up with Grodd explaining, hey, last time you saw me before this event, I was kinda dead. So let me tell you how I fixed that. And he basically says, like, I was trapped under an ancient temple. They left me for dead, but my General Silverback got me out, healed me up. A bunch of people saw that I was back, and through my unwavering conviction, I raised an army. And now I am here to fight against Flash. So, yep, that's that. And Grodd's basically like, hey, I'm either going to kill you first, or I'm going to kill your friends first. Which one would you rather? And Flash is like, none of the above. And then Grodd goes after Iris and co, and Flash jumps in the way, takes a punch straight to the chest, which shatters his armor, and he's like, no, I said none of the above. And then his armor just immediately reforms, and he's like, we're in the Speed Force, bro. I'm king around these parts. And he starts beating the crap out of Grodd. But as he's a bit cocky. He's like, oh, you're delusional, and this fight is over. And as he's about to land a kick, Grodd grabs it, and he's like, I'm sorry, you were saying what? So then we cut back to Central City. The military is currently waiting outside the city perimeter because the illusions make it seem like the city is just a huge crater. We see the humans have managed to infiltrate the stadium where this illusion is being broadcast from. The police chief, I'm blanking on his name, he jumps in and unplugs the illusion machine, or at least one of them. And we see the mirror world watching on nearby. Golden Glider reaches down to try to pull out all of the illusion machines and pull them into the mirror world, but she's not quite able to get them up there. So then Turbine jumps in and he boosts them up to where this giant ice pillar is that can go through the mirror. And they're like, oh, hey, Turbine, we saw you doing something down there. Cool. Welcome to the mirror world. So at that point, all of the illusions fade away. The military starts moving in. And one of the gorillas goes and attacks the police chief. And Patty shows up and just shoots the gorilla. Just 3 shots, dead gorilla. And the military shows up, starts unloading. The rogues are like, all right, we did it. We delayed long enough for the military to arrive. Rogue successful. And all the gorillas start surrendering. And the ones that aren't immediately being kept at gunpoint by the military, like the ones around the city, they're like, all right, we just got called out. Our illusions are gone. We don't know where Grodd is. Screw Grodd. We're bailing. And they all hop into escape pods, and they come across the body of Solivar, and it's like, oh, hey, that's Solivar. Is he still alive? And they're like, kinda, like a little bit. Get him in a pod. Let's go. And so all the pods take off, and guerrilla warfare is over. But we're still dealing with Grodd and the Speed Force. Flash is still taking some pot shots at him. And that woolly mammoth that was chasing down Iris and co. shows back up again, starts charging down the group. And Flash is like, well, this could work out for the best. And he manages to throw Grodd in front of the mammoth. The mammoth just keeps on charging. And he picks up Iris and gets her out of the way. And so Grodd is now just trapped in the Speed Force with a giant woolly mammoth, and Flash is like, all right, well, I don't think he's going to get out because I'm the key to this place. And he puts everybody into the tank. Then Speed Force runs fast enough to open a portal out, and he takes the tank with him. And he's like, oh, there you go, made it back to Central City. And Patty sees that Barry came back, and she's like, ah, yes, hooray, Barry's back. So then, in the mirror dimension, Mirror Master just kind of taunts Turbine with like the memory of his wife and kid. And for some reason, he takes it remarkably well of just like, oh no, how did you do this? Mirror Master's like, I can control anything here. And Captain Cold is like, wow, good job, Mirror Master. You really do have some cool tricks up your sleeve. Mirror Master's like, don't you ever talk to me. You bastard. You know what you did to me. And at that point, they're basically saying like, yep, all right. Anyway, we've got some cool Flash stuff here in the Mirror World now. Let's see how much we could sell it for. So 1 week later, we see Dr. Elias back in his lab. All the Speed Force containers are broken, but he opens up a panel on the floor, and there are apparently 4 hidden ones, and he's like, all right, Flash, now we're going to get serious. So then we see, a whole bunch of welcome parties for all the people who are trapped in the Speed Force, and Barry's giving his deposition to someone who can reverse his death certificate, because it's like, yeah, there was a weird portal thing. I was at that restaurant, and then all of a sudden I couldn't remember nothing. And he's like, okay, well, you're alive, Barry Allen. Congratulations, death certificate revoked. And we see his adoptive father, Daryl, that was his name, Chief Daryl, saying like, hey, I'm not sure. We both know you came back before everybody else did. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm happy that you are here anyway, and I hope one day you can open up about it. He's like, yeah, I mean, whatever. So he talks to Iris, and Iris doesn't remember anything either. And so she's not able to tell anybody that Barry wasn't in the Speed Force the whole time. Turns out they can't remember anything from their time there. So then he comes out, Patty gives him a big hug, and they're like, yep, everything's okay. At least he thinks so. And then we cut to 1 month later where there's a big old boom of red energy, and I'll just read the page. Move forward. He always says move forward, but it's time he learned sometimes you gotta go in reverse. And we see an image of what I can only assume is the New 52 Reverse Flash. So that's that. I like it, but the whole thing of last issue, or maybe it was the issue before, was basically Barry saying, like, I've looked through all the possible scenarios, and the only way this ends is with me sacrificing myself. And I get that last issue was kind of, him going into the Speed Force was him saying, like, actually, no, I thought of a way that I can get out of this. But, like, I don't know, it just came, like, too easy. Because Grodd was still on Speed Force energy. He should have still had some ability to keep up with Barry, but I guess being in the Speed Force gave Barry even more power. It just seemed a bit wonky to me that this was just no, it was just the literally kicking Grodd's butt issue. So I liked it. I think it was fine. The amnesia while in the Speed Force seems kind of a bit too gimmicky, a bit too like, oh yeah, no, really? Yeah, sure. So overall, I got to give this one like a 7 seems harsh, but 7.5 seems too high. So I'm going to give it a 7. The art's fine. I think it wrapped up the story well enough, but everything did just kind of feel a little bit too much of a gimme with how hard it was for all the prior issues. This one is just like, oh yeah, we just unplugged the machines, and then all the gorillas just ran away immediately, and Grodd never really was that much of a fighter. It seemed a bit too easy. So yeah, 7 for this, and we'll see how we get into Reverse Flash continuing forward. Savage Hawkman number 17, written by Tom DeFalco, art by Joe Bennett. Last issue was pretty much the end of the whole Thanagarian arc, and this issue is just the reestablishment of where does Hawkman go from here. So we open up in Manhattan, where there is apparently a bank robbery going on, like middle of the night heist sort of thing, instead of guns loaded. But they pull out this big bomb, and they're like, hey, this is apparently some really high-tech crap. It's going to make a big explosion. Not sure how strong it is, so everybody stand back. And he puts the bomb on the thing, sets it off, and then, like, the whole bank just blows up. Like, they're dead, 100%. So then we cut to Carter and Emma. Emma's back with her father, and her father's like, oh, Emma, you're home. To be fair, I didn't even really know you were gone. And all of Carter's narration is just like, yeah, he's got Alzheimer's. He's very forgetful, and like he's not that aware of things. And we see him explaining to his daughter, like, oh, I found an advanced civilization that has given birth to the ancient Sumerian. And she's like, oh, yeah, tell me more. Meanwhile, Carter's like, oh, my God. Okay, so apparently a big thing of my nth metal now is anytime that there's Thanagarian weaponry being used, I just get a searing headache. So that's neat. So he's trying to make an excuse to like dip out. He's like, oh, Professor, that sounds interesting. How about we talk about it over dinner? You can catch up with your daughter. And Emma's like, actually, you know what? I'm going to just catch up with my dad here and now. So you can see yourself out, right? And Carter's like, okay, yeah, sure. Bye. So then we cut to a bar called the Blood Bucket, where this guy's walking out and he gets stopped by a woman dressed completely in black, who I'm just going to spoil right now. Her name is Shadow Thief. She has a suit of living shadows, and she's here interrogating this guy because apparently he's a snitch who knows a whole bunch of stuff. And she's like, hey, what can you tell me about that bank robbery that went wrong? And he's like, I don't know nothing about nothing. And then she just asks again, and he's like, oh, yes, the guy who bankrolled it owns a restaurant down on 34th. So then we see this guy, and he's talking to, wouldn't you know it, Xerxes. And he's saying, hey, I just lost an entire crew because you didn't tell me how powerful that bomb was going to be. And he's like, I told you it was strong. You just didn't know how strong. And he's like, well, I want a refund. He's like, well, how about a discount instead? And sold. So they're just going to sell more weapons to this guy, but they're going to do it at a later date. And so at that point, Xerxes is like, well, we need to sell all of these weapons because they're not doing me any good just sitting around. So then we see Carter walking down the street, and he goes back to his old apartment that was like firebombed at the time when he left. And he's like, huh, my door is fixed. It's no longer blown off its hinges. And then wouldn't you know it, Singh, his old roommate, or not roommate, I don't know what you call it, neighbor, he shows up, and apparently he got a haircut, and he's dressing nicer, and he's just like a totally different character, which is fine because I barely remembered him. But anyway, he hands the keys off to Carter. Turns out that the landlord thought that all the fire damage was caused by a gas leak, and so he just fixed it and replaced everything Carter owned because he figured it would be cheaper than dealing with a lawsuit from Carter. And he's like, huh, well, you know, I wasn't planning on moving back into my old place because literally all of my enemies know where I live, but, you know, they'd never expect me here, now would they? So he's like, yep, sure, I'm gonna move back in, I guess. Hey, Singh, you want to go get a drink? And Singh's like, I'm now attractive, so I have a date with a lingerie model. So then we cut to an abandoned church where we meet Aviva Metula, who she was a soldier for Israeli forces, the Mossad, and now she's been betrayed by them, but she has this shadow skin suit, which is painful every time she tries to take it off. And now she fights for the entire world. It's all just third-person narration saying that. So anyway, Carter makes his way back to Dr. Ziegler's research facility, and Dr. Ziegler hands off a thing being like, Carter, I need you to translate this immediately. It's super important. And Carter takes a look at it and he's like, I did this like a month ago. Hey, Emma, your dad ain't doing so hot. And she's like, I know. I don't know how to deal with that. So cut to the restaurant owner. He's just opining to his goons like, yes, we're going to do this deal on a yacht, but then we're going to steal from Xerxes because I could have all that tech myself, and we'll give him a funeral at sea. Any questions? Meanwhile, his shadow is actually Shadow Thief listening in on the conversation. Then we see Xerxes and his General Ironsides hoverboarding in, and it's like, hey, I have a feeling this guy's going to rob us. Can you prime one of those bombs so that way I can threaten him with it? And he's like, sure thing, boss. So they land, and as soon as he starts priming the bomb, Hawkman's like, geez, okay, someone's using Thanagarian tech. I got to go deal with this. And he becomes Hawkman, flies off. Emma comes back into the lab, and it's just like, oh, well, the window's open, and Carter's nowhere to be found. Doesn't take a brain doctor to figure this one out. And then we get the new mission statement of Hawkman, which is, there is no Carter Hall. It was just a convenient fiction. He's fully embracing that he is an alien named Qatar Hall, and he is a warrior, and now he is hunting men and monsters sworn to protect Earth from all threats, both terrestrial and galactic. So that's just a thing now. He's now a space cop. So Xerxes is showing off some weapons, and the restaurant guy's like, screw it, I'm going to buy all your stuff. And he's like, all right, cool, sounds good. And I'm taking the 5-finger discount. And then all the guys pull their guns, and Xerxes is like, this is the same bomb that killed your entire squad. It's primed to go off. How about we stand down? And Hawkman busts through the window and being like, yeah, I'll take you all down. And so big three-way fight breaks out. Meanwhile, Shadow Thief shows up being like, hey, those are alien weapons, and I am particularly against the sale of alien weapons, and for that matter, aliens in general. And she starts fighting Xerxes, and Hawkman's like, well, I hope you're not super bad against aliens, because I'm kind of, but regardless, let's fight together. So Hawkman takes on Ironsides. The restaurant guys are not even of challenge at all. But Shadow Thief drags them into this shadow realm she's got going on. And Xerxes and Ironside bail as they drop a whole bunch of bombs on the ground. And Hawkman's like, Jesus Christ, the blast radius is going to be huge. How are we going to get out of this? And Shadow Thief's like, there's no time. We have to. And then all of a sudden the boat explodes. But considering how there's still 3 more issues of Hawkman, I don't think he's dead. Okay, so I don't like that Carter just gave up all of his humanity. He saw what the Thanagarians were. He saw how awful of a people they became. And he's still deciding, nope, that's me. That's who I am underneath. I'll never be human. Time to give up on that identity altogether. But, at the same time, he doesn't. He's just kind of using Carter Hall, I guess, as a secret identity now. It'd be like Batman saying, there is no Bruce Wayne. I guess closer one would be like Wonder Woman and Diana Prince, where it's Diana Prince is just convenient. Underneath it, I am Wonder Woman. It's the same sort of thing here, but, I don't know. It just feels weird to me that he just gave it all up without, anything to say for it. And he was so into, and now I will protect the world. It's what were you doing before? I feel like you were just constantly doing that already, and now you've just doubled down with a new name. I don't know. It seemed weird to me. It felt unearned. The whole neighbor getting a makeover thing, it felt to me like the artist was just I never actually saw what he looked like, so here's a new character, and we're just going to say it's the same guy. The Alzheimer's thing, we'll see if that turns into anything. Seems a bit weird to me right now. I don't know. Nothing in this really jumped out at me as yeah, I'm liking the direction Hawkman's taken now. It's just, all right, yeah, why not? Let's do that. So overall, I got to give this one a 6. Nothing is offensively bad. It's just questionable choices coming out to an average issue. So, meh. All-Star Western number 17, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Moritat. So, pretty much the start of a new arc entirely, post Black Diamond probability. We open up in the founding of Gotham, people coming in by the boatload and having to pack into itty-bitty little living spaces. And 100 years later, wouldn't you know it, there's an outbreak of cholera. And a bunch of people just ran out of the city. The people who couldn't left to die there. The most densely packed and rundown area was called Death's Doorstep. And so they literally built a quarantine that, like, a giant wall was built and just cordoned off a part of the city and left those people to die. And nobody would ever be crazy enough to go in there except for Jonah Hex and co., as they are currently making their way deep into this skeleton-ridden area where death is around every turn. But lo and behold, our story does not actually begin there. It begins in the spring of that year, before cholera outbreaks, and a man shows up to arrive from a foreign land, and I'm just going to skip the preamble. It's Vandal Savage. Vandal Savage shows up. If you're not reading Demon Knights, go read Demon Knights. So he shows up and he starts elbow rubbing with everybody in the city. Everyone knows him, and he makes some big power plays. He moseys on up with the Cobblepots and the Court of Owls, and everyone knows he's bad news. He gives off just an aura of death, but nobody, calls him on it or does anything about it. And one night he goes into the Wayne Casino, and he just starts making bank. And Alan Wayne steps up and he's like, hello, sir. I do not recognize you. Let me introduce myself. I'm Alan Wayne. I run this casino. And he's like, my name is Vandal Savage. You have a wonderful casino here. And he's like, yes, of course. I can't place your accent. Where are you from? And he's like, I've been around the block a few times. I most recently just came from Africa hunting lions. So maybe I still have a bit of that on my tongue. He's like, yes, quite. Anyway, I have a poker game, a very inclusive one, in my private lounge upstairs. If you would like to come up there, we can cash out your chips. And he's like, I wouldn't want to kick anybody out of your game. He's like, actually, we just so happen to have a spare seat, so why don't you come on up? And he's like, yes, of course. Though I do have to warn you, Mr. Savage, we do have somebody with quite an ill temperament there. And then we cut to Jonah Hex with a gun to Vandal Savage, just calling him out for being a cheater. And he's just like, geez, miss, I don't know what you... Thought this was a friendly game. And we see Catherine Wayne telling Jonah to put the gun away, there will be no murder in her husband's casino. And Jonah, is just super pissed, saying how much he's a cheater. And he packs up his stuff and walks out and tells Catherine, you want to keep an eye on him. He's bad news. And then Vandal comes up and starts schmoozing on Catherine, being like, you're such a magnificent woman. Wouldn't it be nice if I could win you in this game? And Alan's like, no. Let's not even joke about that stuff. This is my darling and beloved wife who is definitely loyal to me. And Catherine's like, yes, of course I'm definitely loyal. And Vandal Savage is like, of course. I hope to one day find a wife as loyal as you, but alas, it seems you've made it a lot harder to do so. So anyway, then the cholera broke out at some point, and we see the mayor had apparently banned the giving of food or any sort of rations to the people in there, but Catherine Wayne was like, I can't stand by and let that happen. So she every day went and lowered in food over the barricaded walls. But then one day she fell in, and all the people there then immediately grabbed her and essentially took her hostage for more supplies and doctors to be provided. And Alan Wayne is losing his mind. He's like, the mayor won't step in and help. I gotta do this my own way. And plans on sending in Jonah Hex, Dr. Arkham, because, of course, Dr. Arkham just has to be there, and a world-famous tracker and marksman. And Hex is like, I work best alone, but fine, if you want me to go in there, I'll go in there. However, I genuinely have a very fair chance of dying, so I want 30% of your casino if I get out. And Wayne's like, done, do it. So they make their way in, as we saw at the beginning of the issue. And all of a sudden they're attacked by what essentially seems to be a zombie horde. These people theoretically have cholera, but they're attacking and, biting a lot. And we see them biting the marksman and the tracker, immediately. And Arkham's like, this doesn't seem like cholera. I'm not sure what this is yet, but it doesn't seem like cholera. But Arkham is just telling Hex, get us out of here, man. Get us off the streets. I trust you with my life, and I need you to do that. And so they get into a building and run their way up to the roof in order to see a place where they could take safe haven. And Hex basically keeps on going like, this isn't cholera. This seems a lot closer to like rabies, you know? This is something similar to that. And at that point, he's like, I have no idea how it could get to a scale like this, but you're the doctor, so you figure it out. So Hex looks over the skyline. He sees a bank halfway across town, still technically in the cordoned off area. And he's like, all right, we got to make it there, and we got to seal ourselves in because they won't be able to get into the bank's security system. So they keep making their way. He's firing behind them the whole time. And as they make their way to the bank, they see a man who is just lying dead on like a pile of bodies. And he's still alive. He's still got a little bit of life left in him. But it ain't cholera that's what's killed him. And he says like, oh, he only took her, or sorry, they claim that they're the ones who took Catherine. He's like, oh, we only took her to get some health. We weren't ever going to hurt her. But they don't have her anymore. And it turns out that Vandal Savage has taken Catherine Wayne hostage. And we see him basically standing in a grandiose pose. And he's like, oh, you're mad, Savage. And Savage is like, he just reads off this like Shakespearean sounding quote about how basically he was the one who brought the plague into Gotham. Like, the disease was able to live in him because it wouldn't kill him. He's an immortal. But it would kill everyone else in Gotham. So he was basically death, destroyer of worlds. He's constantly just like, places he showed up, a lot of people died just by virtue of him having plague in him. So, yeah, that's it. That's the issue. It's good. I think it does a great job of setting up Vandal Savage, not only as A, the savage that he is, but B, this threat, just by virtue of him being around, Gotham is worse. Like, it is turning into a worse place. Strictly, I mean, obviously it's because of the plague, but you have to imagine in those sorts of days, it's just kind of like an aura that he gives off. Like, just him being there, all the places he treads, people die, even if he doesn't kill them directly. I like that for a character. One issue I do have to throw at this book, though, it is prose. It is just very, very long sentences in very large caption boxes describing everything I'm saying to you. Honestly, this book probably has more words in it than I have used in this review. It is a very wordy book, and I didn't have a problem with that at the beginning of this book, but it is really starting to rear its head now. So I would like it to take just a step back on that and maybe, you know, like a normal comic book, have characters talk to each other, but like less. So yeah, that's my only real gripe. Overall, I would still give this issue, I give it like a 7.5. It's good. It's a solid issue. Not amazingly great, but it's setting up Vandal Savage as this larger-than-life threat who's able to just bring death everywhere he goes. Teen Titans number 17, written by Scott Lobdell and Fabian Nicieza, art by Eddy Barrows. So, following up from Death of the Family, we're just resetting the board. We're just like, hey, we may have gained some new readers, and we just want to let you know how everything works around here. But first we deal with a guy named Quan Yi, who apparently his ability is, and as is him explaining it, his hands can light up, and then they pop off. The light itself pops off as like a bubble, and then it pops in like a plasma. And he just wants it to stop. Everyone's like, we can control your powers. But he's like, nah, I just don't want to, I want it gone. And he's talking to this doctor who has a name. But regardless, the doctor he's like, hey, I've helped people with this sort of problem before. I can help you. But if you fear for yourself, then I'm able to take away this gift you may have. And he's just like, yes, of course. So thank you, doctor. It's all I ever wanted. And this kid's like young. This kid looks to be like 13 maybe. And he's like, all right, doctor, when can we start? And the doctor just points him over to a table right next to him and says like, oh, over there, just take off your shirt. And there's these giant needle things. And he's like, kid's like, will it hurt? And he's like, yes, it'll feel like your soul is being torn from your body. But don't worry, that's normal. So as soon as he lays down and gets prepared, the doctor disappears as if he were a hologram, and then the needles just drive into him. And the narration says that for 6 months, Kuan Yi hoped and dreamed it would be over, for better or for worse. And then we see, I guess, him still just lying there, but it looks like he's aged about 20 years. And he's just mumbling to himself like, these kids, they have it too good. They're afraid of a little bit of pain. Well, I'll show them pain. I'll show them the light. So that's going to be a villain we deal with at some point, but not today. So apparently during the car ride in a limousine from Gotham to New York, nobody's really talking. And Robin feels bad about having dragged them all into the Joker shenanigans. And they basically are just talking to each other. And Bunker and Cassie bring up, hey, Red Robin, after everything we've been through, can you tell us your real name so that we don't have to keep calling you Red Robin? And Robin explains, like, look, guys, you've met a couple of my, compatriots, and if you knew my secret identity, that would give away their secret identity. Like, I would tell you mine at this point, but, it's not my secret to give up, you know? And at that point, Solstice chimes in like, no, and I get it. And, even after everything we've been through, I consider us good friends. And he's like, that means a lot. Thanks, Solstice. So then Kid Flash is just running around the car a whole bunch. And he's like, hey, guys, I just zoomed ahead and went to our apartment, our loft in Lex Towers. We've been robbed. Everything is gone. So how do we deal with that? And the limousine drives past the turn where it's supposed to go to Lex Towers, and Kid Flash is like, okay, and also where are we going? And it turns out Tim is just like, hey, I bought a yacht. I bought a super yacht. It's a giant thing. This will now be our base of operations because I've realized, and he goes off this whole thing about like, oh, there's less chance that anyone else but us will have to suffer for our decisions. But it's like, you bought a yacht, dude. So either way, everyone is amazed by it. And he's like, yeah, let me give you all the grand tour. So he walks everybody through. Apparently the living quarters are tight, so they will have to actually bunk up. Bunker's going to be sleeping in the same room as Kid Flash. Wonder Girl's going to sleep in the same room as Solstice. And Red Robin shows off his center of command room with 45 computer screens. And he's like, this is where I'll be keeping track of stuff all over. And he specifically uses the phrase, Big Brother is watching. So that might be a thing because Brother Eye, I think, has ties to Tim Drake. But regardless, he's like, yep, so this is my private quarters. Nobody ever come in here. Okay, that's my only rule. But everything else, I'm going to need help running an entire ship because obviously we can't have a crew. But we should be good otherwise. So that night, they're going to bed, and Kid Flash is too hyperactive for Bunker, and he goes through this whole thing about when I first arrived, I spent 6 months in a group home, and I never really felt like I had a place of my own, so I'd always get really, really spastic on the first night that I arrive. And Bunker's like, okay, well, how about chill? And Kid Flash is like, cool, thanks, that's all I needed, good night. And then we cut to a scene in Mexico where a man is in a coma named Gabriel, and a woman comes to visit and says oh, I can't believe what I'm blanking on his name, but it's Bunker, but she uses his real name, Miguel. That's it. Says, I can't believe Miguel's not here. I wish he were, but I wish that he had never done this to you, Gabriel. You don't deserve it. So apparently Miguel did something to someone in Mexico, and we'll get to that eventually. Then we see Red Robin just standing out on the deck of the boat, and he's talking to himself, saying oh, I was going to go to bed, and I could feel you there, Solstice. And Solstice is like, I thought you were just talking to yourself, but I guess you could always feel me. And he basically says Solstice, after everything, I've really realized that sometimes the things you want most in life are just an arm's reach away, as he reaches out and touches her on the arm. And she's like, what are you getting at? And then he kisses her. And then she's like, wait a minute, but I'm with Bart. And he's like, well, Bart's not here. And she's like, fair enough. And then they kiss some more. So then we cut to a scene in a coffee shop where some guy gets bumped into. He thinks the words drop dead, and then everyone drops dead. We don't come back to him, but he's there. So that will eventually come into play. Then we see Red Robin, who has his own room, of course, Wonder Girl knocks on the door, says like, hey, I'm wearing your clothes. I'm wearing your t-shirt because there are no clean clothes on this boat. But, let's make out. That's basically how the scene goes. It was just like, oh, I'm really grateful you were here and all. And then they start kissing as well. Then we cut to elsewhere, where I'm not going to bury the lead, though the book does. Raven is sitting on a throne of skulls, drinking a goblet of blood, and she says, step forward or I will choke you on the very darkness you wear as a shroud. And then this weird skeleton pops up being like, hey, sorry, Raven, your dad's ready to start his plan. And she's like, oh, okay, cool. Didn't think it was going to be that soon. All right, well, may all the gods of light and dark hear my prayer that we're going to do this thing. And then we cut back to the yacht, and we see Robin watching over all of his monitors, and he's getting all these different audio feeds in. And it says, one guy's talking about like a drug deal. And he's like, hey man, don't talk about that over the phone. You never know when Big Brother is watching. And then we cut to the most horrifically demon-eyed, smiling version of Tim Drake I've ever seen in my life. So he's clearly either not Tim Drake or being possessed. My money's on possession. But hey, he made out with literally every female member of Teen Titans. So good day overall, I guess. I know we're setting up future plots or even possibly this plot, but like the whole thing in the beginning, the whole thing with the coffee scene, and then that thing at the end with Raven, like, just tell me the story when they're going to be relevant. Like, don't just do me this little Family Guy-esque cutaway gag of just like, oh, hey, and then he kills everyone in a coffee shop. But it just seems like I'm not going to remember that. As much as you're doing these little things being like, oh, keep an eye out for this in the future. It's like, okay, but tie it into the plot. Have him be like looking at the Titans yacht at the very least. But no, it's just somewhere else in Manhattan. I just don't like the way that this story is told. And this is a thing that's been constant in the Teen Titans, where we just cut to a random other thing that eventually will turn into something we get back to. It annoys me. So yeah, overall, I got to give this one... I was frustrated reading it. I was actually frustrated reading it, so I got to give it like a 5. And the only reason it's not lower than that is because it is the setting up issue. It is getting all the pieces in the places. I understand that there's going to be some growing pains when you enter into a new arc. That being said, this is not the way to do it. So at max, this one's getting a 5, and I could be very easily negotiated farther down the scale than that. I, Vampire number 17, written by Joshua Hale Fialkov, art by Fernando Blanco. So last issue, we had Andrew and his merry gang of vampires have taken over the House of Mystery. And pick up right there. We see Andrew basically saying like, hey, yep, I took over the House of Mystery. I've got my little team here. And I do appreciate he gives names for everybody, so I can just reference back. We have Tig, obviously the teenage girl, Charles Thompson, who knows magic, and the Keeper, which is the archivist they just stole from the, what's it called? The Vampire Hunters. Why am I blanking on that name? Regardless, they all start attacking Constantine and co. And basically, nobody on Constantine's side is winning. It is all and out that they're losing, except for Constantine himself, who's able to cast some magical spells. And he uses his cigarette on like the back of his hand in order to like throw out a huge either fireball or light, which does manage to blast them away a little bit. And Andrew's like, wow, that actually hurt. Good job. And Constantine's like, yeah, thanks. So then Andrew and co like teleport their way back inside the house, and all the people on Constantine's side are like, okay, well, if they've got control of the house, then we've got some big problems. So, how you want to handle this? And Mary just picks up an axe and says like, you know what? Screw it. And walks into the house. And then Debbie goes in afterwards saying, screw it. And Constantine's like, well, now I feel like a little bit of a pansy. And then, is it Jonathan, I think? Troughton, the professor. He makes his way in as well. And Constantine's like, all right, fine, whatever. So first in is Jonathan, who he makes his way into the house ready to attack, and his grandmother's just there waiting. And he's like, what are you doing here, Meemaw? And Meemaw's like, oh, I went to hell, Sonny. I had some impure thought about girls. And then Andrew pops up behind him being like, hey, guess it must run in the family, right, John? Huh? So then we cut to Mary. She's just in a pitch black room. She pulls out her lighter, turns it on, and as soon as she sees around her, it's just a sea of dead bodies who apparently were all the bodies who were responsible, or that Mary was responsible for killing. So last up, we see Deborah. She steps in and she just sees her house and she's like, oh, hey, I'm home. But then standing behind her is Mishkin, I believe her old husband. And he ends up immediately rotting as they embrace. And she's like, son of a bitch, you got me. And so she attacks Mishkin with, I think, a baseball bat. No, it's an axe. Attacks Mishkin with a baseball bat. And then Constantine, we see his thing, and he's like, all right, what do you got? What horror are you going to throw at me? And then Tig just steps up and just be like, nah, it's just me. I'm just going to murder you. And Constantine's like, well, fair enough. See if you can kill me with only one hand. And she lunges at him. He just throws up like a stasis field and just like, yeah, all right, well, that was easy enough. Looks at the necklace around Tig's neck and he's like, oh, hey, this looks familiar. This came from that vampire that Andrew killed off at the truck stop. Did you know them? He's like, no, that was my father. So then we cut down deeper into the House of Mystery, and turns out that the Charles and the Keeper are currently trying to take a stone from the House of Babel and send it down to hell. And their plan is, if they give a piece of heaven down into hell, it's going to open a portal between the two and the entirety of Earth will burn. And that's Andrew's plan. He explained it in the first page. So then Kane shows up and he's just sitting on the steps and he's like, all right, guys, what's going on here? And he's like, dude, are you wearing a dress? And he's like, yeah, I'm a really old guy. And he's like, older than the invention of pants? And he's like, yes, I am that old. He's like, oh, you're Kane. You're the first vampire, right? What are you even doing here? I thought Andrew got rid of all the other vampires. And he's like, I'm not a vampire. I'm something more. I was before vampires. And he's like, all right, fair enough. But can you leave? And then Kane just summons up magic and takes Charles and throws him up in the air. And the archivist is like, oh, okay, don't mess with the portal, man. It's opening the gateway. And he's like, yeah, no, I want you to open the gateway because I'm going to go down and I'm going to go get Lilith, my bride. So then we cut back to John and his Mima's transformed into this horrible tentacle creature. And Andrew steps up behind him and be like, hey, John, I can bring you back. I can turn you and you can join my side. It's simple as that. And John's like, you're not Andrew. You look like him, but you're not him anymore. And she's like, well, isn't that enough? And Andrew leans in for a kiss and John gives in and Andrew rips his heart out, literally. And that's it. John's dead. They come back to it later on. He's definitely dead. So then we cut to Mary, who's struggling with all the dead she killed. Constantine manages to find her, casts a spell to get rid of all of them. And then Andrew steps into the room and just being like, hey guys, just want you to know. And he tosses John's heart on the floor. Just be like, I killed John. He's dead now. And at that point, Constantine binds Andrew to a nearby wall using a spell. And Andrew's like, oh, sounds like the gate's opening. Constantine's like, crap. All right, look, I'm going to go deal with the gate opening. Mary, you stay here. I trust that you can handle Andrew if he's bound to the wall. And she's like, yep, I got it. So then Deborah, she makes her way through the house some more, sees John's dead body, and he's like, all right, screw that. She grabs a sword off the wall and says Andrew Bennett is going to die. So Constantine makes his way downstairs. Turns out Kane is just in the portal, like, all right, Lilith, come on home, baby. And Constantine steps forward, steps over the body of Charles, and Charles is like, I'm gonna kill you, Constantine. He's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Hey, Kane, do you wanna come down from there? And Kane's like, oh, hey, Constantine, your soul is very wanted in hell. I could make a pretty penny off that. So then we cut up to Mary and Andrew, and they talk, and Mary is basically like, Andrew's like, you're gonna kill me, yeah? And she's like, no, worse, I'm gonna talk to you. And she basically wants to know, why didn't you include me? Why didn't you bring me in on your new vampire thing? And he's like, you had half a millennia, 500 years to do something, anything, and you didn't. You're a failure. Why would I want that on my team? And she's like, well, together we could have done something. And he's like, well, together we still could. And she leans in, she kisses Andrew. Andrew gets freed from the spell that was binding him to the wall. Andrew seemingly bites the lip of Mary, which theoretically is turning her. But then a sword comes down, chops off the head of Mary. And it turns out this was Tig. And Tig, it was chopped off her head saying, yeah, I'm getting revenge. And Andrew was super pissed off about this. He's like, no, I was getting her back. And Tig holds the sword to Andrew's neck saying, Andrew Bennett, you killed my father. Prepare to die. Yes, that is a Princess Bride reference. And that's just where the issue ends. It does technically have one more panel of Kane saying that his bride has risen. But Mary is beheaded. John is dead. We are in the final endgame here. We only have 2 more issues, and I want more, god damn it. But no, this issue, I do want to throw out there, this is the first issue that I did truly miss the artwork of Andrea Sorrentino. Not that the artwork in this is bad. It is not by any means. It does a very good job of still imitating the art that came before it, and it's very good. But I see all these scenes in that art style in my head, and I want that. If it was only going to be for 4 more issues, yes, I understand Green Arrow got Sorrentino, but like, why couldn't you have just kept him around just a little bit longer? Overall, though, still a great issue, setting up fantastic things. The fact it managed to kill off possibly 2 main characters, one after another, and I believe it. I think they're dead because we are so close to the end here. I got to give this one like an 8.5 just on the balls of it alone. It's great. It's a fantastic issue. I cannot speak more highly of it. So yeah, 2 more issues. God, I hope they stick the landing. Justice League Dark number 17, written by Jeff Lemire and Ray Fox, art by Miguel Janin. So last issue we left off with apparently an entire apocalypse is coming for both the normal world and the magic world, which I believe was called Epoch, or maybe that was just the place where those science guys came from. Regardless, the whole of the world, there's lightning strikes and stuff like that. Xanadu is providing the narration saying like, yeah, everything's just kind of crap right now and there's nothing we can do about it because our entire team is being held hostage in here. And we see the big science guy named Vicar is leaving because of all the reports of the thunder and stuff outside. So then we get back to Nanda Parbat with Johnny Peril basically saying like, okay, my theory as to what's happening here is that both Earths have a source of magic that is just constantly like growing inside of the planet. But our Earth allows that growth to bleed off occasionally. That's how you get things like Dead Man and whatever else. The other Earth did not have the ability to bleed off that magic, and it's just been building and building and building in pressure. So when we open the 2 portals and we are able, that Earth is now able to relieve some pressure into this Earth, it's kind of doing it super violently. And that's what's happening. And they say that there is technically a way to fix it, but it requires someone to cross over to the other side again. And Timothy Hunter's dad, who's still just hanging around there, is like, hey, I'll do it. My son's over there. I feel responsible for him. Tell me what I got to do. And Colonel Trevor's like, that's not a good idea. And he's like, shut it, I'm doing it. So that's going to happen at some point. So then we see the wild area of Epoch, and Timothy Hunter's like, okay, I'm their lost king, so I need to lead them, right? And Zatanna's like, here's the thing. They might just be telling you a story that makes you, like, sound good. Like, only do this if it feels right to you. And one of the magic people are like, she's a liar, don't believe her. And he's like, okay, but do you see what I'm talking about? Like, seems a little suspicious, but, follow your heart. If you want to do this, I'm behind you 100%. And all of a sudden, a spy shows up saying like, hey, just want to let you guys know they caught a team of people and they are currently going to interrogate them. And Zatanna's like, that sounds like our team of people. Oh, geez, we have to go get to them. That's important. And Timothy's like, all right, well, then I've made my decision. We got an army. Let's go attack the science people. So he flies off on a dragon as everyone else follows behind. So then we see a page of them taking out some science soldiers using things like ghosts and fairies and whatnot. And the reports of their attack make it back to... I just heard his name. I literally just heard it. Vicar. That's it. He's saying, oh, it sounds like all this stuff's crazy, but there are reports of an army going on, and whatever meteorological this event is, it surely won't cause as much damage as this army, so I'm going to go focus on the army. And they're like, all right, cool, whatever, here's the coordinates. So then we see everybody getting interrogated with apparently some mind control or mind reading devices. And Boston basically asks Constantine, like, hey, do you have a plan? And he's like, yes, I do. We're going to sit here and wait until Frankenstein figures out whose neck to wring in order to free all of us. And Boston's like, that's your plan? And he's like, absolutely. So then we see Frankenstein is being investigated by some science soldiers who are like, this guy isn't magic. He doesn't have any magic in him, which means all of this is science. We need to tear him apart and study him. And Frankenstein's like, I really don't like being in labs. So, I'm going to go ahead and just beat you guys up now. And he just breaks out, grabs one of them by the throat and says, like, tell me where my comrades are kept and then tell me how to get out of here or I am going to kill you slowly and painfully. And he's like, yeah, your comrades are down that way. So Xanadu then, she's still aging, she's still dying, but she's like, all right, I got to use the last of my magic ability to see the future one last time. And she basically says, Constantine, I'm going to die here. I can see that. You're going to open up a portal and it's going to get some of us home. Not all of us. You will definitely make it through. And he's like, no, I'm not going to leave anyone behind. He's like, shut up. I know you're going to do this. Sometimes it's going to be Black Orchid or maybe Boston Brand, but no matter what, you are always going to make it through. However, at some point in the future, you are going to be responsible for Zatanna's death. It says here, hands clasped around a fire that does not burn, an evil voice whispering your name and Zatanna. Zatanna dies at your word. You will give the order that will lead her to her death. And Constantine's like, no. Anyway, Frankenstein shows up and frees all of them. Xanadu is still just barely clinging to life, so they got to figure out how to get out of there quickly. And Constantine's like, this is all my fault. This is my curse. I hurt the people I'm nearest to. And Deadman's like, dude, shut up. I am so sick of hearing about this. So we see the magical army has approached the City of Science. And Zatanna's like, okay, let me see if I'm able to maybe pose more of a threat. And so she casts a illusion spell that hides the real army and looks as though there's an army of like hundreds of thousands about to attack. And it's like, all right, now tell us where John is. So we cut back in. They are making their way down a hangar exit, taking out some soldiers in their way, when all of a sudden, because of the magical lightning stuff, the entire hangar closes in and they're not able to escape out there anymore. And honestly, the entire hangar starts collapsing in entirely, so they're forced to run back the way they came. So now Vicar is seeing this army of 100,000. He's like, all right, everybody shoot to kill. And they start attacking the illusion army, while the real army has gotten up underneath their defenses, and now they are launching their counterattack. And that's where the issue ends, with a whole like charge with Timothy on a dragon and whatnot. It looks awesome, but it is, I don't quite have that much of a link to that plot. That's the thing. This feels a bit too torn. There are technically there is the plot with Timothy and Zatanna, and then there's the plot with the rest of Justice League Dark. And those are the two primary plots. But then you throw in the extra stuff of what's going on in the real world, you throw on the Vicar subplot, and you throw on the fact that this whole apocalypse thing isn't really in any of those other plots. It's just another thing happening. So overall, you get 5 different plots going on here, and it just feels stretched a bit thin, I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying that I don't really have any real attachment to any one of these plots, because none of them have really taken the time to be the hook. All of them are just kind of, no, it's big and bombastic. Isn't that enough? And it's not. It doesn't feel like it is. It looks great, and I like the pacing of it, but I'm not quite invested in any of it yet. None of it feels like it is the big thing, you know? Even with them taking the time to say Constantine's going to get one of them killed or trapped in this dimension, it just doesn't feel like it hits that much weight yet. It hasn't earned that. So overall, I got to give this one like a 7. Almost all of the reason it's not a 6 or a 6.5 is because Mikel Janon's art is fantastic. It looks great, but yeah, it does fall into a thing of I'm just not emotionally invested yet, and I hope that it can get there before the end of the arc, but frankly, I'm not sure how much time it really has left before they're out of the world entirely, so yeah, guess we'll see. And that's it. That's all the comics from DC Comics this February 27th, 2013. And if you've been listening to this show in order, or at the very least listen to Batman Incorporated and iVampire, which you should always listen to iVampire, I don't know why you're not, I may have seemed a little bit callous in the fact that when Robin died, I was like, oh no, so sad, or whatever. But then when I got to iVampire, 2 like B-tier characters died, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe they're doing this. And I just want to point out, the Robin one was telegraphed so hard. Like the cover of the issue was like, he's dead. You are forced to know this before you even open the book up. Meanwhile, iVampire, it just surprised me because these characters have been around since the beginning of the book, and then they just die without any sort of like note that it's going to happen. No telegraphing. And I think that really speaks volumes to how I prefer my marketing to be done. Like, I understand that they need to sell X amount of issues of the death of Damian Wayne, but like, keep it a little surprising, you know? At least going in after the fact. Like, to the comic shop owners, fine. People can ignore the solicits. People can ignore the covers. Keep it secret. Anyway, I really don't have anything else to talk about, so I'm just going to tell you the comics coming out next week. So we have 13 comics. And the numbering is all sorts of messed up here, but I will do my best. We have the number 18 issues of Batwing, Detective Comics, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Stormwatch, Animal Man, and Swamp Thing. Number 10 issues of Earth 2 and World's Finest and Dial H. The number 6 issue of Phantom Stranger. The number 4 issue and the finale of The Human Bomb. And because it just got delayed, I guess, the number 17 issue of Superman, which I also believe is the end of Hell on Earth. Finally and mercifully. One other thing I want to mention in terms of events, obviously we'll have Wrath of the First Lantern going on, but Detective Comics and pretty much every Bat book that's going to be coming out next month is going to be about Damian Wayne. It is all the issues tying into Requiem. So I don't know how deep into each comic is going to be. I don't think I've ever even seen Batgirl talk to Damian Wayne, but there's a Requiem issue, so we'll just see how that manages to turn out. Anyway, I really should stop rambling. Thank you very much for watching and listening. If you have comments, feel free to share them on Discord or Twitter or Patreon. We have all those things, and they're all in the description and or on screen if you're watching the video version. But that'll do it for me. Thank you very much for watching and listening. However it is you consume this podcast, keep tuning into this show. And as always, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.